Hey, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking through an FRQ from AP Physics C Mechanics. This is from 2023. It's FRQ number 2, and it's primarily dealing with simple harmonic motion and energy concepts. It does have a little bit of rotation at the beginning of the problem. It is definitely worth looking at if you are an AP Physics C Mechanics student. There are some tricky things here to be aware of, so let's go ahead and get to it. First of all, the problem makes reference to a torsional pendulum. And in case you're not familiar with what a torsional pendulum is, I'm going to show you a quick video of that you can see on my screen here. This is an example of a torsional pendulum. So it's basically going to be simple harmonic in terms of its motion, and there's a spring, so as it rotates from one side and goes back to the other. But if you're not familiar with what a torsional pendulum is, then the problem gets a lot harder. So that's what it is. Now let's go ahead and apply it to this problem and see how it goes. So I want to not read at you. If you want to pause and read the problem yourself and think about how you would approach this part, go for it now. Otherwise I'm going to touch some of the highlights here and talk you through it. So it does tell us what the rotational inertia or moment of inertia is for the system. It's just 1/2 mr squared. And notice we have n equals 1 here. So the problem begins with like, alright, you've got one disc in a torsional pendulum, and you're going to add more discs to it. And these discs are all uniform, we assume. So as we add more discs, what does that do? Like, what is that going to do to various properties of the system? Okay, fair enough. And then it says, using this equation down here for the period, derive an expression for the period as a function of n being the number of discs involved. And then we're working with these constants down here as appropriate. Fair enough. So let's just start here. I'm going to talk you through it, but if you want to pause and think about what you would write, then please do so now. Okay, so we can start by writing out the basic equation that was given to us. I will say when I first read this problem, I was thrown off. I thought that that italicized I under the root, is actually an L, which makes a big difference. And in the context of talking about simple harmonic motion, that would be like the length of a pendulum. We don't have that system here, so that's not an L, that's an I. So just be careful with that. And we define also what our I value is, so we can go ahead and write that 1/2 mr squared, the basic equation for shapes, like point masses and so on for the rotational inertia. Then we can say, alright, well, what do we know about combination shapes for rotational inertia or a moment of inertia? Well, we know that the sum of these things, so we can just write it out as a statement. You can say the sum of the rotational inertia is equal to the rotational inertia of each of the individual pieces. So we can make a statement something like this, like we're just going to add up the number of values that we have. So if we think about what would that imply, like how would we modify this rotational inertia equation, then we could say, well then, therefore, this is just 1/2 nmr squared, where n is the number of discs that we're going to add to this shape to be able to get the total moment of inertia. So then we just take that, and we're going to sub that in over here and see what we get. So we end up with this. And to simplify a little bit, we end up with something like this. And that's fundamentally the answer. So it's actually pretty easy beginning to one of these FRQ problems. It's a good start for 2A. We'll label this as A right here. And let's go ahead and move on to B and see what we have. Okay, and so B talks about the potential energy stored in the torsional pendulum when the discs are displaced is this. So obviously a key equation here. On the following axes, stretch a graph of the maximum kinetic energy, Kmax, of the torsional pendulum as a function of n for n greater than 1. Alright, so really important that we notice we're talking about the maximum kinetic energy. And if you think about it, what has increased, or what changes as n increases? Well, if you think about our equation here, our equation does not have mass in it whatsoever. All it depends on, really, is this kappa value, which has to do with the torsional pendulum. It's like our spring constant, right? So that's what this value is here. This kappa is like our spring constant. And this delta theta is just the angle at which it's released from. There's nothing in here that if we change the mass, it'll change the potential energy. If you think about it, it's tempting to do a lot of various things. Let me explain it this way. it's tempting because you probably have done something like this in your class, where if you think about a system that starts from potential energy right here, you could have a system, this is badly drawn, but if you have your potential energy like that and your kinetic energy like this, it's tempting to think, oh, maybe they want me to think in these terms, because that is something I've done in my AP Physics class in the past. That's a common sort of activity to do, is to think in those terms. That's not what's happening here, because they're talking about just the maximum kinetic energy of the system, and there's no difference. If we add more of these disks to it, doesn't seem to impact the initial potential energy. And if that's the case, it's not going to have any impact on the kinetic energy max here. Like, there's no impacts, you could say. In other words, that potential energy initial gets turned into kinetic energy, but if there's no mass involved, then therefore there's really no difference. And so what do we have here? We just have basically a straight flat line like this, and that's going to be our potential energy. So all of this business in here is a head fake. That's not correct, but that's my first thought when I read a problem like this, because of things I've done in the past to train my brain to think in those terms. But because they say maximum kinetic energy, and because they define the potential to begin with has no impact if we change the mass of the system, then we can say, well, then the kinetic energy is going to remain constant, so that's going to remain whatever the value is to begin with. Alright, so that's B. Let's move on. Okay, and so let's take a look at C. It says the student plots the data for the period as a function of root n. I'll put that in case you can't see that, as shown. So we have a root n over here in case you can't see that as well. So it says draw the best fit line for the data. This is typical in these types of problems. If you have a data set, oftentimes you're going to draw a best fit line and calculate the slope. It's just something to think about. When you draw a best fit line, what you're going to want to do is have roughly the same amount of points on one side of the graph as you have as the other side of the graph. This, I think, would be easier to do with pencil and paper, actually. But I do want to point out also as well, do not force the line to go through the origin. There's oftentimes good reasons for the line not going through the origin, in the sense of experimental error is the reason. Don't force it, is what I'm saying, to go through 0. Of course, the other really important thing to notice is that we want to use points from the line in calculating slope. I'm already thinking about calculating slope whenever I do this. It's just by habit. We can explain why later, why that's going to be here, but we'll almost certainly need to calculate the slope of the line. I'm just picking 2 points that I can easily read here. Let's get some XY values for this. And then we're going to do our slope calculation. And I ended up with 0.278. Those are going to be units of seconds here for our slope. That's important to notice. This is what we had written down previously for the period. There are a couple different ways to approach this, but by far, in my opinion, the most important to get comfortable with is to be able to think about this differently. So this is like our y. In terms of a y equals mx plus b format of an equation, this is like our y value. Embedded in here is like an m value, or slope value. So we have slope calculated from this line right here, and we've got slope that we're going to need to do. It says calculate the mass m. So we need to get m by itself of a single disk. So how can we go about doing that? Well, we need to think about what is our x over here. Our x really is going to be our root n. So if we get rid of our root n in here, then this whole thing right here can be our m value in terms of our slope. So we can write m in terms of our slope, little m, is going to be equal to 2 pi times the root of mr squared over 2 kappa, all under a root here. And we want to get the mass. So the question we're being asked for is, what is this mass over here? So we could say our lowercase m, or our slope, and we want to get mass by itself. So let's square both sides of this. So we would have 4 pi squared times m r squared over 2 kappa. And again, we're trying to get m by itself. So at this point, you want to multiply by the reciprocal of the stuff you want to get rid of. So if you look on the right hand side, if we want to get m, then we're going to multiply by a fraction. I'm actually going to use a different color. I'm doing that on purpose because it's going to make it easier to visually see what's going on. we definitely need 4 pi squared below, and we need 2 kappa up top, and we need our r squared below as well to isolate for m, and then we need to multiply by the same thing over here. And if we do that, we should end up with our mass. So we could say mass is equal to this business over here. So plug in our numbers and see what we get. And if you do the math correctly, I ended up with a mass of 0.156 in that ballpark kilograms. So that's how you would go about approaching problem C. I would say this is a core of doing an AP Physics C Mechanics FRQ. You need to be able to work with the slope. This is really crucial here. Work with the slope of the data that you're given. Think about what the slope means. Put that into a y equals mx plus b format and interpret what that all means in the process of solving the problem. And then also, of course, draw back on what you had solved for previously, which is what we have right up here. This is what we had solved for from part A, I believe it was. Really crucial skills in this FRQ right here to practice. Okay, and so part 3 says the student finds the value given by the manufacturer is less than the value determined experimentally. Determine a single source of experimental error that could result in the observed difference. So we had already basically calculated what the mass is going to be and set up that whole equation. So what would make this less, a lesser number? Well, one thing that would make this lesser, we could do a couple different things, but an easy way of doing this is just to say if the radius was greater, like if this was greater, that would cause this m value to go down, right? So if we say something like if the radius was measured to be larger than it actually was, then the mass value would be calculated to be less than it actually is. So that's actually an easy problem if you refer back to what you've already calculated for mass. Okay, and so part D says the student repeats the experiment, but now the discs have a density that varies as a function of the radius of the disk according to density is equal to 0.3 r. So I want to take a moment to think about what this actually means. If you think about it, we've got density, let's say density of like 1 when r is equal to 1, so that would be 0.3 times 1. Well, then density of 1 is just 0.3. So now let's increase that. Let's say what happens if we increase that radius? So the density of 2 would be 0.6, right? The density of 3 is 0.9. So what do we notice about the density as the radius increases? The density as the radius increases also increases, meaning more of the mass is distributed towards the outside of the disk. Well, what do we know about the moment of inertia for a system that has more of its mass towards the outside? Is it going to be a greater moment of inertia or a lesser moment of inertia? Well, it's going to be greater. In other words, if you were going to swing, let's say, a sledgehammer, if you swung a sledgehammer from like this where the mass is on the outside and you're gripping it right here, that's going to be a lot harder to swing than if you had the sledgehammer the other way and you essentially grabbed it right here and you somehow rotated it like this. It's actually easier to rotate it where the mass is more towards the center of the axis of rotation than towards the outside like we have in the top scenario. So this has a greater I. You could say this has a lesser I. That's the concepts that they're getting at to try to think through this. And what do we know about I? Well, I is embedded in this equation that we previously have done. So we can make the statements that the root of I is proportional to our slope. Because the question is talking about the slope here, so how would the slope be different? Well, if we're now talking about a system where the I value is going to be greater, you're still going to get the same answer as the root of I. They're directly proportional. So would the slope be greater? Yeah, it would be greater, right? So you could justify this by saying this is your justification here, really. Like the mass. So if we have more of the mass distributed towards the outside of the system, the I value is going to be greater. We would expect to see a greater slope as a result. Okay, and so looking at DII part 2, It says when n equals 1, the maximum angular speed of the torsional pendulum with the uniform disk is found to be omega u. Okay, when n equals 1, the maximum speed is some different angular speed or angular velocity. We'll call it angular speed here. Which of the following correctly compares omega u and omega non-u? Well, let's remember what we're doing. We're adding more disks to the system as time goes on, and we said that the kinetic energy is essentially going to be the same. We said that previously in a previous part of the problem. Remember that the potential energy of the system did not depend on the mass, so therefore the kinetic energy we said was going to be the same throughout the whole system, even as we add more masses to the system. So if our kinetic energy is the same, but the masses do increase, we've got a u of the system is going to be equal to k for the system. And they told us something previously like this was k theta squared or delta theta squared, depending on how you want to think of it, is equal to, this is a kinetic energy deal, so in terms of rotational kinetic energy, this is what we have here. And you could say we have to compare the rotational value to begin with the rotational inertia for non-u, let's call it, as it increases. So it's actually less. Our initial rotational inertia is less than as we add more of these things to it. Then therefore we could say, well, this omega u must be greater than the omega non-u, because for their kinetic energies to be the same, the one with the least amount of mass, or I value, would have to be moving faster than the one with more masses added to it. So that's how to think through this. And I do want to say this problem had some twists and turns. It's actually, I think, really, really insightful to go through old FRQs and think through the logic of how to get the points. Hopefully this has been helpful. I've done screencasts on an entire year of physics, as well as many concepts for AP Physics. So if you have any questions or comments down below, please let me know. And I hope you all have a great day. Take care.